Okay. Am I typically the type of person to do these giant mega hauls where I'm buying a bajillion trillion books in 1 month or even one day? No. Do I typically have a book buying problem? Yes, I'm very impulsive. No secret. However, one of my biggest goals whenever I started the new year, one of my New Year's resolutions, was to put myself on a book buying ban and also read 50 books that I already physically owned by the time we hit April, because I knew I wanted to go ham in April. Today, April 25th, is Independent Bookstore Day. So indie bookstores all over are celebrating their new influx of people, celebrating them with events, with special occasions, with giveaways, with author visits, with all this stuff. I got a tattoo at last year's Indie Bookstore Day. It's that one. But of course, in true Houston, Texas fashion, the city just had to be a little bit different. Every year in April, in all of April, Houston does the Indie Bookstore Crawl, which is an entire month-long celebration incentivizing people to go out to their local independent bookstores all over the Houston area, which is like over 30 locations. There's a whole bingo board with Oh. And then they gamify it by turning it into a bingo board, which you know I love. It's even divided on the back of being north, west, south, east, and in the loop. Now, did I meet my goal of reading 50 books that I physically own before the month of April hit? No. I did, however, reach the goal of picking up, and at the very least, starting 50 books that I already own by the time we got halfway through April. I have for sure read and finished at least a good 35 that I physically own, and have for sure hard DNF'd 9, with the rest being in my currently reading rotation. I have a system. I hit 6 stores in today alone, which is a lot. I have been driving so much. Houston is so far from Houston. I'm exhausted. So here is every single book I got in all of April. Let Us Descend is something that I picked up over at Lit Java, which is a coffee shop bookstore. This takes place in the American South during the time of chattel slavery, and a young enslaved girl who begins a connection with nature spirits of some kind out in the swamps. It seems very promising. Then I got a bunch of stuff from Blue Willow Bookshop because of 2 main reasons. Number one, I love Blue Willow. But also, Blue Willow very recently did their Teen BookCon, which is a young adult novel convention set on connecting authors with their target demographic in person. Blue Willow does 3 of these festivals every single year. They do Bookworm, which is for picture books. They do Tweens Read, which is for middle grade. And then they do Teen BookCon. My mom and I volunteer at all 3 of those events every year. It's great. Because I'm part of the volunteer team for the event, I was at the store the day before the event with all the authors doing a little meet and greet, going over what the expectations were for the next day, and then bought some more books at the actual event. The cover and the title for Mrs. Jekyll caught my attention immediately. It's described on the back as being heartbreaking and seductive, as well as a powerful feminist reimagining of the original Gothic classic. I'm really fascinated by the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and the complexities of monstrosity. I'm very excited for that one. And then I found this one, The Unruly Heart of Miss Darcy. This is a Pride and Prejudice romance centered around Kitty and Georgiana. Are you freaking kidding me? I'm very excited for this one. I love Pride and Prejudice and all of its variations. I love lesbians. Oh my god, they're merging. I also just really appreciate any storyline that centers on Kitty, the true forgotten Bennet sister. There are so many retellings and adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, especially in the modern takes, where Kitty does not even exist. Justice for Kitty, my new lesbian queen. Then the books that I got at the actual event, I'm really excited for. I got to moderate a panel with a bunch of YA fantasy romance authors, and so then I got all of their books. I picked up The Weaver Bride, which features a young witch, and in this world there's something to do with getting a weaver husband or something. In this world, it's really important, very special, very refined, very elevated to find a weaver husband, whatever that means. And our main character does not have the status, but does have the secret ability to open any door. I don't know what one has to do with the other quite yet, but I am intrigued. Then there's A Practical Guide to Dating a Demon. This one also caught my attention because I'm pretty sure this is the same cover illustrator who does Kimberly Lemming's books. And if it's not the same person, then whoa. Our main character goes to a special school, a special magical academy in this special magical fantasy setting, and has a bunch of boys trying to hit her up, and she's turning them down, and they won't take no for an answer. So then she says that she already has a boyfriend, that she's already betrothed, and they're like, to who? And she's like, to this demon. And then the demon shows up and is like, right, so when are we getting married? And that's so delicious. I don't know. Last but certainly not least from this teen book con situation was The Swan's Daughter by Roshni Chokshi. I don't know if any of you have ever heard this woman speak in person before. Every word that comes out of her mouth sounds like spoken word poetry. She's so just lovely. with her words when she's answering all of these questions on the spot, which makes me even more excited to get into this fantasy romance that she has. I also remember getting really emotional on the panel because the final question was sort of asking, I think, like, what the book meant to her or like something along those lines. And she had a whole section where she was talking about how she wrote this book while she just had her newborn daughter, and she was thinking about how so many characters and like folklore and fairy tales have dead mothers, and like how that made her feel as a mother to a daughter, and like all this stuff. And I was like tearing up, and I was like, not okay. There's a prince with a curse surrounding getting married, and there's a competition to win his hand, and there's a whole thing, and there's magic, and I'm very intrigued. And now let's get into all of the books I purchased today. My very first stop was a store called Forgotten Lore Bookshop that I had never heard of before. It's an indie bookstore that focuses on used books, but specifically like first editions, out of print, special editions that are hard to come by. Nothing that's really brand new or current. And so I didn't really go into it expecting to find anything, but I did find this one really, really cool book titled Angry Women. It's volume 13 of a series of books and collections called Research, but it centers on 16 different performance artists that are answering these questions and going in and out of all these interviews discussing like feminist theory and sex and power and the body and like femininity and womanhood. And I was reading some sections from an interview about S&M, and I'm just really, really fascinated with it. Ooh, but also at that store, they had a whole shelf of these mystery books that they were just giving out for free with every purchase in the spirit of Indie Bookstore Day and the whole Indie Bookstore crawl. They all had these vague descriptions in silver marker. And so I got the one that made me laugh that just says, "Are these guys running the show?" So let's open this together to see what bonus book I got for free. The Freemasons, the Ancient Brotherhood revealed. And you know what? I don't know much about the Freemasons. Are they running the show? My next stop was at Books by the Bay. I went last year during the indie bookstore crawl, and the cashier, I think she's the owner, she remembered me. She's so nice. They had a really cool thing that was going on today where they had like a little wheel for everyone to spin whenever they went up to purchase something, and it had like 15% off entire order. That's what I got. 10% off one book. Spin again. They had things going on. So I picked up 2 books that I'm really excited about that I think are really telling of who I am as a person. I picked up Lucy Undying, which I have been curious about for so long. First of all, this is one of the most beautiful, gorgeous, stunning book covers I've ever witnessed ever. But second, this centers on the story of Lucy, like Lucy from Dracula, who is often pretty forgotten in the overall narrative or like misconstrued anyways in adaptations and retelling. And so this is about Lucy and also entering the 21st century and self-discovery and things. The other book I got was Get in My Swamp, which is like published Shrek fan fiction by GM Fairy. And I mainly just wanted to buy this because I love to see GM Fairy like successful. Oh, GM, never change. Ooh, but what was also cool about what was going on with Books by the Bay, not books, but they had this like little local pop-up vendor who had the cutest handmade quilted things like ever. I got this book sleeve that is Dr. Pepper. But also, like, when I tell you, this was by the door. So, like, as soon as I walked in, my eyes shot to it first. And it was the very first thing I grabbed. I didn't even look at any of the other books. It's a quilted heart-shaped tote bag. She had this in multiple colors, but the black and white was my favorite. I was very tempted by the red, I will not lie. But it's so cute and frilly and a good size. The shop name is Dearest Little Hope, and she was just the sweetest ever. Okay, moving on. Oh my god, you guys, I finally went to the new location for Kindred Stories. So if you don't know, there's this bookstore in Houston called Kindred Stories. For the longest time, the shop was this like converted house, just like in a neighborhood over on Emancipation Street. It's in the 3rd ward, and it's also like right next to, or it was right next to a comic book store that was made out of like a converted like, God, what is it called? I tried to come up with the name this morning and I also couldn't think of it. Gigantic container thing. Storage container. Months and months ago, they announced that they were closing this location. They were closing down the store to open up a new location. And I was so sad because I was like, no, I like that area. I like going to that place. But the new location is quite literally right across the street from the old location. And it's this bigger, expanded, like proper storefront that's like also attached to this really interesting cafe. It is so great in there. It's so fantastic. And it was just a really good time, and they were playing really good music, and everyone was just having fun. And I was chit-chatting with people in the romance section. We had a great conversation about Kennedy Ryan. I got to recommend JL Seekers because they have a whole display for her. I picked up 3 things, 2 that have been on my TBR for a while, and 1 that I impulse bought that I'm so excited about. Sky Full of Elephants is one that I've heard a lot of discussion about. It's this really interesting literary fiction that begs the question, what if all of the white people disappeared? I just have a million questions. Then I finally got around to picking up Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. These are 2 people at a wedding who are in the wedding party that are not together and probably should not be together, which of course we know will last for more than a week because it's a romance novel. And the last thing I picked up at Kindred Stories, I'm so excited about. It's called My Soul to Keep. It's been blurbed by Octavia Butler, which already is the biggest green flag imaginable. This is about a journalist and an ancient vampire who should not be in love with her but is. Together, they are about to pay the ultimate price for their ambition, and their desire. Then I finally went to Class Bookstore, which is also in the 3rd Ward. It's near TSU. It's a majority nonfiction bookstore that's really, really cool. I was really intrigued by this whole table they had filled to the brim with different zines. So I got Office of Strategic Services Sabotage and How to Master It, because I would like to master sabotage. And then I picked up A Blind Date with a Book, which we are also going to unpack together. The description says, nonfiction, explore the impact of Homer's iconic poem from its conception to the present day. Hypochondria by Will Reese. Part personal memoir and part riveting history of the fateful and absorbing uncertainty that is this book. I've never heard of this book before. I'm excited. And now in this bag, we can get into my last 2 visits of the day. Murder by the Book and Brazos Bookstore. Those 2 felt like good closers because they're right next to each other. They're walking distance. And also I was putting off going to that area because parking is truly a game of chance. The majority of the businesses in that area that do have parking are very strict about towing if you're not there for that business. And sometimes people in Houston are shady. Like, they have a sign, but it's off to the side that you can only see on a full moon damn near. And they get you. That's how they get you. And so going over there stresses me out. But it's so worth it because these 2 stores are fantastic. I got one thing from Murder by the Book because I was overwhelmed and it was packed, but I did want this. Coyote Songs. This was on an entire shelf dedicated to Texas authors. And Murder by the Book is really cool because that's an entire bookstore that's solely dedicated to like mysteries and crimes and murder. And one of the people at the register was so excited to see someone getting this book because like this is one of their favorite horror authors. And the only reason why I felt the need to really like take this home with me is the line on the back that says, magic was her weapon, vengeance was her obedient dog, blood was her fuel. Say less, I'm there. Involve me. And then Brazos Bookstore. I love that place so much. I could just stand around in there for hours. They have such a great selection that's so diverse and varied, and like I just want to look at everything that's in there all the time. I got 3 books that I'm so freaking excited about, especially because I've never heard of any of these books before. Well, okay, one of them is a book about an artist that I love. Brazos Bookstore has a great selection on all genres, but they especially have an amazing collection of nonfiction works. So I picked up I Told You So. Scientists who were ridiculed, exiled, and imprisoned for being right. This goes through the really horrifying and really absurd history of governments and societies at large completely disregarding and even punishing scientific minds that are attempting to make improvements and make these new discoveries, who were later, often after their death, revealed to have been correct the whole time, which feels very important to talk about and acknowledge now. Sunburn, which I feel is going to hurt a lot. This takes place in the early 90s in Ireland, about a good Christian girl who has a plan to fall in love with and marry and make babies with the farmer boy next door, except that one summer things escalate between her friendship with Susanna. It's described as being tender and heartbreaking. I'm expecting to not do well emotionally. I think a great big old closer for this whole haul is this one. I got a whole chunky, heavy art book entirely about Marcel Duchamp. I have spoken at length about my love of Dada, and the Dadaist art movement. It's this really cool, really interesting absurdist art movement that I think is like getting increasingly relevant today because of the internet being what it is. I think a lot of the internet, especially on social media, is just modern Dada at play. I learned about it in art history in college and I've never been the same since. It was an art movement that was born out of wartime, where a bunch of artists in Europe were super nihilistic in a way. They just reached a point where they were so anti-war and they were anti-establishment, anti-government, and they started to get really experimental and bold with their art and insisted that art should not have rules. So they came up with a gibberish name for a nonsense movement where they just did whatever. They were doing all of these alterations to pre-existing artworks. They were presenting toilets in art galleries that they didn't even make. They just took a toilet and they put it, and it's so good. They pushed the boundaries of what is considered art. And Marcel Duchamp is considered to be sort of like the father of Dada. The cover features like one of his most controversial, famous pieces. He took a postcard of the Mona Lisa and then drew a mustache on her, and then that was his piece. I'm really excited to crack open this bad boy and like look at more of his artwork and look at more of his stuff, because he also had this whole other thing where like he has this feminine drag persona that he would do photo shoots as. But like every artist that was involved in Dadaism was just so cool. Like these are some OG rage baiters we're talking about. And that's my haul. I'm really excited. I really love the mixed bag of things that we have going on, and is majority things that I have never heard of before, which I think is always really exciting and always the really great part about just like wandering through a library or a bookstore. Okay, I'm exhausted. The sun is going down. I need to be horizontal.